Alright, so I've been wanting to get into reviewing competitive Overwatch matches for a little while now, and I figured with World Cup coming up that it would be good for me to just find a match that was interesting and review that before World Cup matches start. And the thing that I found interesting with this was, due to GOATs being so prevalent in the meta right now, it was interesting to see a team kind of try to counter it rather than just play into GOATs, which even in this tournament, both of these teams did play GOATs quite a bit. But for this specific attack, last night's leftovers tried a really different comp to try and counter GOATs. And so to preface this specific attack and let you kind of know what was happening beforehand, this was this specific attack was happening in the best of 7 match for the grand finals for the Beat Invitational, which was an online tier 2 tournament, and it was also a double elimination tournament. So both teams had already faced off against each other, and last night's leftovers ended up winning that one the first time 3-2. And so after Toronto worked their way up through the losers bracket, they got back up into the grand finals, and now they're facing off again. And this is the second half of Dorado, where last night's leftovers already defended against Toronto Esports. And you can see where they held, which wasn't a bad defense. They held them before the second checkpoint, which is good. And so now it was their turn to push past it, which seemed pretty likely for them to do. And then they would be up 3-2 in the series. Toronto are running this pretty straightforward GOATS comp. The only difference is that they have an Ana instead of a Moira, which the difference between Ana and Moira in this situation is that Ana offers you more ranged healing, but also her biotic nade allows both of the other supports to do even more healing from her nade, and also her nade can cancel healing of other people if they dive in, which can allow them to easily burst down one target and kill them. Versus Moira, who will just offer even more healing output and usually get her ult a little bit quicker than Ana will, and you can use that aggressively to push in on the team once you get that ult. And if you haven't been watching Overwatch that much recently, the only really big downfall to GOATS is that it lacks range, which Ana sort of makes up for, but since she's a healer, she's not going to be focusing on like dealing damage at a range. So usually good counters are snipers or just people that can keep their distance away from the Reinhardt and the Zarya and the Brigitte. And so initially, last night's leftovers runs this Genji and Sombra dive comp, where dive is usually GOATS and D.Va, and then sports aren't insanely important for dive, but this duo with the Lucio helps the Ana move around and stay away from a potential GOATS comp. But they end up swapping off of this comp pretty quickly once they spot that it's GOATS. And so they come out of spawn here, and then Toronto Esports pushes out of the tunnel really aggressively to try and get control over the cart to stall it out more. And so now that last night's leftovers spots that they're going up against GOATS, they switch to a Pharah, and then a Wrecking Ball and a Mercy as well. And now this offers them that range DPS where Pharah can just sit up in the sky and barely take any damage and just free fire down their team the entire time. The Sombra stays because she can hack an EMP, which is really good against GOATS because it just takes down all the shields and all of the barriers that the 3 tanks and Brigitte offer. And then Wrecking Ball is usually picked just because of his mobility, where one of the good things with GOATS is that you can just run and chase people down. But with Wrecking Ball, he can swing around the map and gain momentum and just roll straight through teams and split them up and pull attention away, but then also get away without taking too much damage. And then they swap to a Mercy just to help the Pharah even more. And it allows that support to basically be invulnerable to GOATS as well, where they're just never going to be able to actually be chased down and killed successfully. So now you can see the Pharah is just able to free fire down onto this team, and they're not really able to do much about it. So they try to push in onto the Sombra, it looked like, and when they do that, Dogman is also flanking onto the high ground, throws a bio nade down, catches a couple people, and this very nearly kills Nero. But at the same time, because Dogman went for that grenade, Crackalacken spots this and realizes that he can just dive onto Dogman because Dogman won't be able to heal himself back up with the nade or anything like that. And so Dogman dies for that, but then because they have Mercy, they can just res him right back up. And the big issue with Dogman dying there is it forced Hawk to come up and Defense Matrix the res for him. And Sugar Free isn't really going to take any damage, but Gator is going to get hard focused. And so is Hawk, just because they're not going to have any healing with Mercy going over spending time resing and the other support being down. So both tanks for last night's leftovers get burned down pretty quickly. And so now, even after that really nice Bionade from Dogman, because they weren't able to get a kill from it, it left last night's leftovers in a bad situation even after the res, where now they're having to refill up health bars, and it allows Goats to just kind of sit there and stall the point with last night's leftovers not being able to gain any ground on the payload yet. And even more so on that, it allows Dino to go for a very aggressive sleep dart onto Sugar Free and actually hit it somehow. And they're not able to get the kill, but that was still a really cool sleep dart. And he can go for that just because he knows both tanks aren't going to be pushing him, and they already used res, so last night's leftovers is going to be playing a little bit safer now. But now ults start coming in, and Sugar Free is able to get his ult very quickly because he's just able to free fire and not really have anyone shooting back at him. And they throw the nano in as well, and Nero just gets blown up. And then they throw the EMP in also, which keeps Crackalacken from defense matrixing that barrage away. And this is basically what their comp is going for, is the barrage with nano and EMP. Like, all three of those combined will just, it should win them every fight that it happens. And so now Sugar Free is just able to basically clean up the rest of the fight from here, even just off of those 2 kills that they had from the EMP and Nano Barrage combo. It's a couple nice shots into the Lucio there, but at this point it didn't really matter what Toronto does. The fight's basically over. They're just trying to stall the points as much as they can. Although the issue now is Toronto's going to be coming back with 4 really good ults, whereas last night's leftovers really doesn't have much for ults, and it's at like no ults they can combo. And so Toronto just instantly comes out, uses Rally and the sound barrier so that they can get right onto the cart and just instantly stop the cart where it is. And then I'm going to let this play out because everyone starts pressing Q and using their ults.
Looking for the back line. Grab on the Dalton, just gotta get rid of the Sombra, no hacks in play. And it works out for Toronto. They just dive onto the payload, they find some of the scatters, and even with Hawk getting asking, the defenses put themselves in a good spot.
Absolutely, but this fight is by no means over. Sugar Free gets
Alright, and then I'll break that down now. So Toronto initiates with both of their support ults, and instantly Ajax pops his Valkyrie to hopefully keep everyone alive around them and allow them to reposition and get out of the way of the Goats comp from Toronto. And then Gator drops mines on point because he can see that's where they're running to, although with Sound Barrier and Rally up, and with Toronto having 3 barriers through Zarya, Brigitte, and Reinhardt, they can just walk through those mines with the barriers, not take damage, and so they're not really going to be slowed down by the mines at all. Then instantly after that, Decod solo shatters Gator off screen, and asking solo grabs Dalton on the Sombra. And normally, solo, like, using these ults on just one person is not very effective just because of how good of those ults, are. But against the comp that LNL has, or I guess into the comp that LNL is using, LNL is basically going to be split all around the map, and so they're never going to be grouped up to the point where they're going to find 2 people. And if they are, it's a huge mistake on last night's leftovers part. So the solo shatter onto Gator might seem bad and doesn't even result in a kill, but it locks him in place for a little bit, and that's honestly the best that Decod might be able to get from just that shatter. He's probably not going to hit any other target. And then the solo grab onto the Sombra is also seems bad, but it secures them that kill onto Sombra for sure, whereas otherwise Sombra can just translocate out from any damage and basically avoid any attack that Toronto does onto them. And as you can see when Asking's pushing up initially, when all of Toronto's pushing up initially, that Hawk is defense matrixing right in front, in between Asking and Dogman, because they know that that grab is coming, and keeping Dogman alive is really important. And so if that grab gets eaten, it's an even bigger waste on Asking's part. Asking notices it too, and that's why he just turns and does it on the Sombra really quickly. And then a really cool combo comes in here with Hawk's Diva Bomb, where Hawk was watching, waits for Asking to use his personal barrier and his friendly barrier onto Kraken, who helps Dino secure the kill on the Sugar Free. And so once those barriers are down, Hawk throws his bomb in, aiming for the Zarya, basically, and if he can get anyone else, that's a plus. But then also Gator flies in and uses his slam on Wrecking Ball to knock up Decod and Asking, so that Asking can't get behind the barrier from Decod. And this is something that I've noticed a little bit more with teams doing, where they're comboing these knock-up stuns that basically, rather than destroying the barrier like an Earth Shatter would, it just freezes the people in place and they can't escape and move away from the Diva Bomb. Where another combo it would be like is using a Doomfist uppercut, because it stuns those players sort of in position, it knocks them into the air, and they aren't able to get out of the way of the bomb in time. And so it helps them get more effectiveness out of those Diva Bombs every time they use them. So Toronto backs up to rebuild their barriers and everything after that push, now that both of their support ults are through and most of the armor is kicked down. And with the res back onto Sugar Free, he's able to get the nano onto him and build his barrage and use that instantly, again burning straight through Nero, and then turning to Decod and burning through him as well. And then Crackalacken gets nanoed to help stall the point, and Dino sits way back healing him. And Last Night's Leftovers have the advantage here, but they all focus on the Crackalacken, which is exactly what Toronto wanted to happen. That's why they put the nano onto him. And that gives Asking time to come all the way from spawn to come up onto the high ground and kill Dogman, which again pulls the res from Ajax, which means that Sugar Free's not getting healed, which allows Dino to focus him and kill him. And so while Last Night's Leftovers still have the numbers advantage here, they just lost their main DPS where all of their damage is going to be coming from. And then Toronto made a couple swaps there to help get them back to the point quicker. And the reason they went Genji and Winston was to make it a little bit more dive-centric, because Last Night's Leftovers doesn't really have anything to counter dive with this comp. It's a very good GOATS counter, but it doesn't exactly counter dive. And Nero wasn't doing much on the Brig, and Decod was basically just standing on point with shield and seeing how long he could survive for. And so this offers them the ability to be more aggressive towards diving Dogman, or also chasing down Sugar Free, chasing down Dalton on the Sombra and trying to find him and locate him. But also, it would have been good against the Pharah, because they could be more aggressive on diving up at the Pharah and chasing Mercy down. But Sugar Free swaps over to the Doomfist to try and get back to point more, and after seeing how the swaps came through for Toronto. And I think one of the big things that Last Night's Leftovers messed up on, in that fight specifically, was that right after that barrage came through, they got so stuck on trying to clear the cart and focused on getting Crackalacken off the cart. But what they should have done is gone for Dino, because this entire time, once that nano hits on the Crackalacken, Dino takes barely any damage and doesn't get focused down at all. And so he's just able to constantly pump healing back into Crackalacken while he's got the damage resistance from the nano on him. And the other players on Toronto are basically just swapping in and out on the cart and trying to stall it out and keep Last Night's Leftovers from gaining any ground, while their other two people, Nero and Decod, are coming back from spawn. And they even end up getting a kill out of it. And so, just this giant stall from Toronto works because last night's leftovers never put pressure onto the Ana and never stopped where the healing was coming from. And so even though it looked like last night's leftovers was winning or had won that fight, they were barely able to move the cart. They moved it just around the corner now. And Toronto came back with their heroes, and now they're back at 6, and they just start cleaning up onto the point. And it's a little bit of an overkit with it's a little bit of an overcommit with the Nano Blade from Nero and Dino, but at this point it's not a big deal because there's only like 10 seconds left. So last night's leftovers are just going to be trying to get to the point to stall, and at that point the game's basically over. Sugar Free has a really nice push here, but they still have the sound barrier for Toronto, so asking doesn't go down to the dive that they add onto him. Here, I'm just going to let what ZP and Reinforce said play through now, so you can hear that, because they both kind of go over the main thoughts from this, essentially, pretty well.
The defense of Toronto was still able to delay and buy that much time. What in the world happened?
They just keep out-sustaining this damage. I mean, as you said, Sugar Free is roaming free on this Pharah, but they can't really capitalize on these picks and all this damage coming out from Sugar Free. You have to maybe question the tank line a bit. Did they take the correct moments to engage and go aggressive based on Sugar Free's damage? But then again, a lot of crucial small plays coming out of the side of Toronto Esports as well. You know, just using a Graviton Surge to kill Dalton on the Sombra, that's a memorable moment, roughly 2 minutes in. And so I think that Toronto Esports, they acknowledge their win condition and they use their ultimates to their advantage, where Decode would just use an Earth Shatter, get 1 pick, that's good enough for the defense, and Asking would just get 1 pick with the Graviton Surge, that's going to be enough. And so they never really enabled LNL to be in full force and 6 men coming down with this anti-ghost composition.
And so I think a really good point that Reinforce brings up is what causes LNL to mess up. He brings focus to the tank line, since he's mainly a main tank player, or since he is a main tank player, and it did seem like that was part of the issue. They didn't seem comfortable on the Wrecking Ball, and Gator seemed to play a bit passively for that hero, and never really got value from his ult in any way. They were never able to combo it with something that worked. They were never able to drop it into a spot that really took Toronto off guard or slowed them down in any way. They honestly could have run Winston instead, since that would have given them follow-up to the damage that Sugar Free was doing. Like, the best example being that really good Bionade right off the start onto Nero, and Sugar Free was just short of getting the rockets to splash damage onto Nero and kill him. If they just had a Winston dive in there, get that kill, drop bubble, he might take a lot of damage from it from the Rhine, but he should be able to get that kill and then get back out, or at least block the Ana's damage from the Reinhardt, or the Ana's healing onto the Reinhardt, and allow Sugar Free to get even more free damage off. Overall, I just think LNL should have swapped things up a bit. I don't think the Sombra or the Wrecking Ball are really getting the value they needed, which allowed Dino to take out Sugar Free twice on that attack. And I think they needed to put more pressure onto Dino. The best example was definitely that second fight with the Nano onto Crackalakin, where Dino was just able to constantly pump healing into his team without really needing to worry about anything else, because I think that not only was it Gator's fault for not really having the experience on Wrecking Ball, or maybe the confidence to go and chase down Dino in that moment, but it could have also been shot calling. Maybe they were all saying, kill the D.Va on point, kill the D.Va, but Dino was able to free fire and constantly pump healing out, even with the Brig down, not able to throw an armor pack onto the Ana and heal her back up from a dive that happens. So I've watched this specific attack back a couple times now, just to look over the kills and the alt usage and all of that, because my first impression from it was that LNL played it better, but rather that Toronto was just out stalling the point and preventing LNL from gaining ground, which made it seem like a weakness from LNL's comp. And at the end of it, though, Toronto had 15 kills, with 3 of those res back, and then LNL had 12 kills, with Sugarfree getting a little over half of those kills. And so both teams ended up playing very evenly there, but it was more of the comps that allowed that pressure onto the points, where LNL had a good comp for countering goats, but they weren't really able to put pressure onto DCOD to the point where he would back up from the cart. And so they were just constantly able to stall point. They weren't really able to put much damage out other than Sugarfree, but Sugarfree can't get through any barriers or defense matrix or anything like that, and can't really burst someone down alone. And then the other thing that I noticed that was interesting was Dino and Kraken both only died once during that entire attack cycle, or during that entire attack. And not only that, both of those players got important kills, where Dino killed Sugarfree twice, and Kraken had very good self-destruct onto Ajax when Ajax was using Valk. And then also, Kraken was usually there to punish Dogman or Sugarfree and kind of assist in getting kills onto both of those players. Overall, both teams used around the same number of alts, with LNL using 1 more. But I would say it's more of the effectiveness that these teams got out of the alts that mattered, where both uses of Wrecking Ball's mines never really did anything for last night's leftovers, and both Valks didn't really help that much or change how a fight went. And especially with Ajax getting Diva bombed out of one of them, it really made the Valkyries not that helpful for last night's leftovers. And so the other cool thing that happened with alts was both teams ended up getting 3 nanos throughout the entire attack, and both teams kind of wasted 1 nano on each side, where I'd say the very first nano that happened onto DCOD for Toronto, well, generally that works in Goats comp, and that's almost always where the nano goes, just because Reinhardt can just constantly swing at the other team and build his ult up really quickly and go for a shatter and then charge and usually one-hit someone with it. But the issue was, in that situation, against the comp that LNL had, the Reinhardt swinging isn't going to do much because he can't really chase anyone down and actually do damage. So he's just kind of sitting there with a nano, and that's it. And then the bad nano from LNL happened when Dogman kind of panic nanos in a 2v5 and throws his nano out onto Hawk to try and help him stall point. But at that point, they'd already lost the fight, and with them being attackers, stalling point doesn't matter as much. Where it would have been better if he had maybe tried to save that nano, so that when they come in, that overtime push, maybe he can nano the Doomfist that goes in, or nano the Wrecking Ball as he goes in, and help both of them stall cart so that they can regroup and actually attack on that last point. And so the other thing I wanted to consider was, how could LNL have used their alts better? In my opinion, they didn't need to nano the barrage. They could have just used it on... They could have just used that nano onto a different hero, like Diva or the Wrecking Ball, so that when they fly in, they get more damage or something like that. Where throwing it onto the barrage is already going to do enough damage that the damage boost from nano and the damage resistance onto him aren't going to matter much, because Toronto isn't going to be able to really go up and deal with him when he's ulting anyways. And then to kind of expand on that, I think that rather than the Wrecking Ball, they could have stayed on the Winston, just because, partially because that's what they're more comfortable with, but that also gives them another nano target. You could just have Gator on Winston, dive in onto Dino, barrier him, then drop a barrier around him, and just solely focus on the Ana, and then get the nano, maybe as he's diving in or right as he hits. So he has that resistance to survive the rest of the GOATS comp from Toronto, circling him and all focusing onto him. And potentially even killing Dino just with that. I also think the Mercy wasn't exactly needed. They could have tried a Zen in her place, but the difference that Zen offers compared to Mercy is it would give Zen the healing they would need on the Pharah, because Mercy offers a little bit too much healing for that, because there's going to be no one focusing the Pharah. It's a nice combo to have Pharmacy, but it's not really needed in this situation. We could have just thrown a Zen up or a Zen orb up onto the Pharah, and that would be enough healing to survive whatever Toronto would try to do. But it would also give you Discord Orb to help you, or Discord Orb, which would help you focus down targets and just help with shot calling in general, because you throw a Discord Orb onto someone, and it's something that everyone can visually see that you don't need to call out, and it also gives you that damage boost onto that hero, so it helps them burst down whoever has that Discord Orb quickly. The biggest issue with last night's Leftovers comp is, while each hero is able to avoid and survive GOATs, they aren't really able to get kills onto the GOATs comp and focus down anyone. LNL seemed to rely heavily on Sugar Free to get these kills and rely heavily on his damage, but they were never able to follow up on that damage, and so they're never able to really turn that damage from the Pharah into kills. He also had the only really effective ult that by itself would reliably get a kill, if not get really, really close to kills, with the next one being the D.Va ult, which they never really comboed, they just kind of threw it out solo every time they used it. And so, backtracking a little bit, if last night's Leftovers had maybe comboed the EMP with D.Va Bomb every time, maybe that would have helped them win another fight, or they could have tried to combo the mines differently, so that rather than just dropping them on the point, which they did both times, they could try to drop it into a choke point and then throw a D.Va Bomb at that spot as well, and then EMP on top of it and use all three of those ults if needed. And that just adds so much chaos and so many things for Toronto to think about that most times it will end up in at least a kill or two, if not more. Or even if it doesn't do that, it at least could split up that GOATS comp and allow you to get a kill from Sugar Free then. So to kind of wrap this up, I think LNL made good swaps, but I don't think they were quite comfortable with these heroes, and they didn't really understand the comp that they were using, if that makes sense. I think a little part of that is just how new Wrecking Ball is, where teams don't really know how to fully utilize him and be super effective with him, but also how to work around that hero and how to synergize with his ult, synergize with his abilities, or anything that he can do, really. He has a really interesting kit, but no one really knows how to work with that kit. And so I don't quite think that the comp that LNL had was the issue. I just think that their execution and synergy weren't quite there with the comp. And I think that they don't have the experience with this comp to truly beat teams that are good with GOATs. And with how prevalent GOATs has been, lots of teams are good with GOATs, and it's tough to beat. I also think Toronto played this point very well. Hats off to Dino and Kraken for both making huge plays this entire defense, and both only dying once. And it helped that they were both... I think it helped, especially that Dino was an Ana versus a Moira, because it allowed him to actually shoot back at the Pharah and be a sort of counter to Sugar Free, and in fact resulted in Sugar Free dying twice because of that. Kraken on D.Va can fly up and do a little bit of damage to Pharah. It usually won't kill, but he could also defense matrix the Pharah and kind of block out specific damage and keep Sugar Free from doing exactly what he wants the entire match. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the World Cup matches this week, and the new spectator client especially, because it'll allow me to really focus in on maybe certain players and just get a good a better understanding of how fights are going. Because then, like an example from this one, Decod solo shatters Gator, but that's off screen, so you don't really see exactly how that happens, where it happens, anything like that. You don't see why Gator isn't charged and killed or anything like that, why there's only, and why Gator's able to survive that essentially. And with the new spectator client, if it works well, you can then just free roam camera essentially the entire fight and spot little things that you would never be able to pick up normally. I'm definitely gonna find certain things to review from these matches, but I'll either try to focus on certain plays, like certain attacks, certain weird team comps that work or don't work, or something along that. Maybe even focus on a certain player or hero pick. And I don't really want to take the time and just review an entire match, because I don't want to spend an entire week either editing through that for like multiple matches, or doing like super in-depth play-by-play review of the matches and having to edit through all of that and cut it down and stuff like that. But I also don't want to do the opposite of that, where I just kind of wing it and do a shitty review like from my very first watch of it and just upload that so I can try and get as many uploads as possible. So I'm going to try to focus it down a bit more and make better quality videos out of these reviews that I do for World Cup matches. And I hope you enjoyed this video, especially if you made it this far into the video. And I'll figure out an intro at some point. So yeah, peace. And so it begins. Alright, so this is going to be my first review video that I've ever done. We'll see how it goes. Alright, so I've been wanting to get into coaching for Overwatch and all of that, so I'm sure everyone who watches this video is going to know that already, so not starting that way. But they end up switching... but they end up switching. But they end up I mixed the words again 4 times in a row now, come on. And I figured with World